In this video, I'm going to show you how to use worms to compost your food scraps indoors. Hey guys, it's Mindy from Our Inspired Roots. I teach people how to homestead for better health. Today we're going to talk about vermicomposting. Vermicomposting, or worm composting, is a system of composting where you can use worms to actually turn your kitchen scraps into compost that you can use in your garden. There are a lot of benefits to using worms for composting. It's a really great system for people who live in an apartment or otherwise don't have outdoor space to compost. And it's also really great if you want to start a compost pile, but it's maybe it's winter and you don't want to go outside, or you want your compost to start decomposing sooner, or maybe you just can't get outside all the time to do it. So you can always have your worms inside, and that makes it really easy and accessible. Another reason that vermicomposting is beneficial is that it keeps a lot of, this is really composting in general, is it keeps a lot of food scraps out of the landfill and turns that nutrition back into the soil for plants to grow again. And finally, of course, it saves you money. You save money on buying fertilizer for your garden, and you save money on your trash bill. So it's a overall amazing thing to do. A lot of people wonder, is vermicomposting or worm composting stinky? And the truth is it's not. I'm sitting right next to it and I don't smell anything at all. It has like an earthy smell, a bit of an earthy smell, but it's not a gross smell at all. So it's really not something that I think most people would even have a problem with. And then when you put the cover on, you really can't smell anything at all. So how to build a worm composting bin. Here is a very basic worm bin. It's two 18-gallon bins, plastic bins. The bottom one we put rocks or something like that in the bottom to keep the top one up a little. This top one has holes drilled in the bottom and in the sides for air circulation. And then we also have a top which we drilled holes in, and that goes on top. But it keeps the air circulating. So what you need for your worm composting bin is you need bedding, which is basically the brown materials that you would put into your compost pile, like shredded newspaper, leaves, coconut coir, any of the brown materials that you might put into your compost pile. And the food that you feed your worms is just kitchen scraps. There are a few things that I wouldn't put in. I wouldn't put in anything that's acidic, or I don't put in onions, and I don't put in citrus or other acidic things. And I also don't put in anything with seeds, because the seeds will start growing, and that can be really frustrating to have rogue pumpkins growing in your composting bucket. So those are things that I avoid. But for the most part, you can put in anything that you would put into your compost pile. You'll also need a spray bottle of water to keep the bin damp. I don't ever need to do that because of the bedding I use. I use shredded paper and I use coconut coir, and the coconut coir needs to be wet to it comes in a brick, and it needs to be wet in order to kind of crumble apart. So usually is enough liquid. Plus the kitchen scraps often are pretty wet. So I haven't really had to use the water spray bottle at all, but it's something to have available if you need it. So right now I'm going to show you how I harvest the compost, because that's what I need to do right now. And then I'll show you how to add materials. So as you can see, this side has lots of newspaper. This is the side I've been putting newspaper and kitchen scraps in. This is the side that's mostly decomposed. So I had been putting scraps over here for a long time, and then in order to harvest this compost, I don't want the worms to be in it. So then I moved to just putting the food over on this side, and that gets most of the worms to travel over there to eat the food. So there are a few worms, I see some here, but for the most part this side is pretty empty. So what I'm going to do, because there are some worms, if I find a worm I just like pick it up and put it on the other side. But I can kind of just scrape off the top like this and then put that. So it takes a little bit of time. It's not a super quick thing, but that's the way you do it. And so I will go ahead and harvest this side. See, there's a worm right there. I'm gonna be careful with that one. Scoop the worm over. And I will harvest this side, and then I'll show you how to put more materials in here. So I cleaned out this side of the bin of all of the compost that was already decomposed. And now we're ready to put new bedding in as if we were starting from scratch. So this is how you do it. First, you want to put in your bedding material. I like to use newspaper and coconut coir. The combination is pretty good. Combination of the newspaper doesn't hold on to a lot of water and the coconut coir does. So together they kind of balance out. So usually we'll take the shredded newspaper, put some in on the bottom first. And then a little bit of the coconut coir, which is, you can see it's kind of crumbly, and what's nice about that is that the worms don't have to work really hard to compost that, because it's already broken down pretty small. So then I put in food scraps. I put in a little bit of bedding material on the bottom, putting in food scraps now, and then I'm going to cover it up with more bedding material. Okay, and so now if I were just putting worms in, I would get my worms from the mail. I get mine from Jim's Worm Farm, and I'll post a link in the description. So I get them in the mail, and when you get them you want to put them in as quickly as possible. So I would have this ready, have the bedding in there and even the food a few days before you expect the worms, so you can put them right in. So if you have your worms, then you would want to put them in now. You could make a little hole for them and cover them up a little, but you don't want to keep air away from them, so suffocate them, I guess. So you could also just put them right on top, put a light so that they start burrowing down. And when you get them, they won't seem very lively, but they'll liven up once they're in their home and getting food and things like that. So I think that's it for the worm bin. If you liked this video, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next video.